He was barely 10 years old, tiny hands clutching a stack of papers too big for him to carry, eyes filled with something no child should ever know, determination, born from pain. The courtroom fell silent as he stood beside his trembling mother, facing men who doubted everything about them, their worth, their truth, their place. He wasn't supposed to be there, but when he said, "I'm my mom's lawyer," the room froze. No one could believe what came next, because what this little black boy did that day didn't just change his mother's fate, it shattered the silence of an entire system. Amari was a bright, curious boy from a quiet neighborhood where dreams often clashed with reality. His mother, Jasmine, worked long shifts at a law firm, not as a lawyer, but as the woman who cleaned the offices after everyone had gone home. Still, she carried herself with pride, teaching Amari that dignity wasn't something anyone could take away. Their mornings were filled with laughter and cereal at the kitchen counter, their nights with homework and stories about fairness and truth. Amari admired his mom more than anyone. He saw how tired she was, yet how she never gave up. She always said, "One day people will have to listen when you speak, Amari, but until then, learn everything you can." Then, things started changing. Jasmine came home quieter, her eyes dimmer. A new manager at work, someone who saw her skin before her skills, had begun targeting her. Suddenly, her paycheck was short, her shifts were cut, and she was accused of mistakes she hadn't made. She tried to stay calm, but Amari could see the fear she tried to hide. And one morning, that fear became reality. A letter arrived, folded and cold, stating that Jasmine was being sued for something she didn't do. It was written in words meant to confuse and intimidate, but to Amari it was clear. Someone powerful wanted to break his mother. What he didn't know yet was that this moment, this injustice, would be the start of something far greater than either of them could imagine. The days that followed felt like a blur for Amari and his mother. Jasmine tried to stay strong, but the lawsuit consumed her every thought. The firm she had cleaned for years now accused her of damaging company property, a lie born from resentment, not truth. Behind those words was Mr. Caldwell, the new manager who never missed a chance to remind her she didn't belong among professionals. He'd smile when he spoke to her, but his eyes said something colder, something that told her she wasn't seen as equal, only tolerated. Soon her coworkers began to pull away. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Doors that once stayed open were quietly shut. She wasn't invited to staff lunches anymore, and whispers followed her down the hallways. The weight of isolation pressed harder every day. But what hurt the most wasn't the words, it was the disbelief. When Jasmine tried to explain, no one stood beside her. Not one person she'd helped for years came forward. Amari watched it all from the corner of their small kitchen, clutching his school books, pretending to study while his mother cried softly into her hands. He didn't understand why people who knew her kindness could suddenly act like she was invisible. And when she finally received the court notice summoning her to appear before a judge, something in him changed. He stopped being afraid. While his mother sat trembling at the kitchen table, Amari opened her old laptop and the one missing a few keys and began searching. He spent hours reading about lawsuits, discrimination, and workers' rights. Most of it made little sense, but he refused to stop. Each sentence felt like a small piece of power he could give back to his mother. Days turned into weeks and the tension grew heavier. Neighbors started talking, some advising Jasmine to settle, others warning her not to fight. "You can't win against them," one woman said softly. But Jasmine didn't want to give up. She just didn't know how to fight back. Until one night Amari placed a folder in front of her. It was filled with notes, handwritten, messy, but full of facts, quotes, and legal terms he didn't fully understand. At the top of the page, in shaky letters, he'd written, "Mom's defense." Jasmine stared at it for a long time, tears filling her eyes. "Amari, and how did you—" she began, but he only said, "You taught me to speak up, Mom. Maybe it's time we do." From that moment, things moved fast. Court dates were set, letters kept arriving. The firm hired a team of lawyers, polished, confident, and ruthless. Jasmine couldn't afford legal help. It felt hopeless. But Amari refused to let her walk in alone. He read everything he could find, from online forums to public court documents, slowly piecing together what the lawyers might say and how to respond. The night before the hearing, he stayed up until dawn, eyes burning, whispering sections of the law under his breath. Jasmine tried to make him sleep, but he wouldn't. "If they won't listen to her," he said quietly, "they'll have to listen to me." The next morning, the courthouse loomed tall and cold against the sky. Reporters weren't there, but the air still felt charged, like something bigger was about to happen. Inside, Jasmine sat trembling on the bench, clutching the same folder Amari had filled. Her heart pounded as the opposing lawyers smirked, shuffling their files like it was just another case. Then the judge entered. Everyone rose. Silence filled the room, and when the judge asked if Jasmine had representation, she hesitated. Then, from behind her, a small voice said firmly, "Yes, Your Honor, I'm her lawyer." Heads turned. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. It was Amari, standing straight, dressed in his neatly pressed school shirt, holding the same folder. The lawyers chuckled at first, but that laughter would soon vanish, because what happened next would leave not just the courtroom, but everyone watching in absolute silence. The courtroom was thick with disbelief. Amari's voice, though small, carried through the air with a weight no one expected. The judge looked stunned. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, and Jasmine sat frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. But Amari didn't waver. He walked to the front of the courtroom, clutching his folder like armor, and began to speak. His words weren't perfect. Some stumbled, some cracked, but they were powerful. He spoke about the nights his mother came home exhausted, the way she was treated differently after the new manager arrived, how she was blamed for things she didn't do. Each sentence was filled with the raw truth only a child could tell. Simple, honest, and impossible to ignore. The opposing lawyers objected, their voices dripping with arrogance. "This is absurd," one said, shaking his head. "He's just a child." But the judge held up a hand. "Let him finish." And Amari did. He read from his notes about missing paychecks, unfair shifts, and witnesses who refused to speak up. He described how his mother's dignity had been stripped away piece by piece, not by force, but by indifference. The room fell silent, every word echoing like thunder. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out something small, a photo. It showed his mom standing outside the firm late at night, mop in hand, while the same manager who accused her laughed with his friends inside. "She was there working," Amari said softly, while they said she wasn't. For a moment, no one spoke. The evidence wasn't just on paper, it was human. It was pain. It was truth. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears as she watched her son, her little boy, doing what no lawyer had done for her, giving her voice power. The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. Across the aisle, the firm's lawyer's smirk faded, replaced by something else, doubt. Then came the turning point. Mr. Caldwell, sitting at the defense table, shifted uneasily. Under pressure, his own words from a recorded voicemail, one Amari had found on his mom's phone, were played aloud. "She's lucky I let her work here at all." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shock. The truth was no longer hidden. Amari stood there, trembling but unbroken. He looked up at the judge, his voice barely above a whisper. "People like my mom, they deserve respect too." And with that, the silence returned. Heavy, emotional, unforgettable, because in that moment, it wasn't just a little boy defending his mother. It was a child standing against a system that told them both they didn't belong. The next words from the judge would change everything. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence that fades quickly, but the kind that lingers, heavy and unforgettable. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing like a heartbeat through the room. He looked down at Amari and Jasmine with a softness that hadn't been there before. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both authority and something else, humanity. The lawsuit was dismissed. The accusations against Jasmine were declared baseless. And though no formal apology came from the firm, everyone in that room knew the truth had won. But for Jasmine, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was something deeper. For years, she'd been told to stay quiet, to accept what life handed her. That day, her son's courage gave her back something she didn't know she'd lost, her voice. As they walked out of the courthouse, the world felt different. The same people who once looked through her now looked at her, not as a janitor, not as a victim, but as a woman who had stood her ground. Amari walked beside her, hand in hand, his folder tucked under his arm like a badge of honor. Cameras began to flash, reporters asking who the boy was. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the days that followed, the story spread. A little boy defends his mother in court. Some saw it as inspiring, others as impossible. But for every mother who had been overlooked, Eve,